This week we're going to be talking about Chapter 4, which has to deal with CSS and styling websites. One of the things you need to be aware of is when we play with HTML, HTML is just strictly to be used to provide the basic formatting for elements that are on the page. We don't actually want to state in the HTML what things will look like. We're just trying to do the basic layout. To actually format the page, we're going to use CSS. For this example, we are going to be using a new document. I called mine playingwithstyles.html. I would like you to do the same thing. I created the document as a bare bones document example. Okay, so I want you to add a couple of things to your document. We have our doc type declaration. This is HTML. When you make your HTML tag, what I want you to do is add this language equals in. What this does is it tells the browser that the language contained within this is English. And the other thing that we're going to do is tell it to use this character set. And so we created a meta tag inside of the head that says character set equals UTF-8, which is our Unicode character set. So that will be added to every document. This is your basic document for all of the web pages that you will make from here out through the rest of the semester. Along with these pieces of the web page, there are some other ones that we want to add that are just for structural purposes. So I'm going to add some more tags, and we do have a head section up here. This is the section that contains all of the items that describe what's in the web page, but we also have another one that is called header. So I'm going to make a header section, and what this is going to be is things that are at the very top of the page, like maybe a banner or just a welcoming message or something of that nature. The next one is going to be a nav, and what this is for when we add links at the top of a page. Where is the navigational structure? We have the actual body of the document itself, but the entire document should be contained within a div, which is just strictly a division. Oops. And then the last thing we are going to add is our footer. So within each of these sections, our header, this is going to be something like a logo, a banner, some sort of slogan. The nav section, this will be the links for how to actually navigate our site. The div in the middle will be where our document is actually contained, where the actual information the user is trying to look for is contained. And the footer would be something at the bottom, such as our copyright information. Once you have these laid out, save this, because you will need this layout for the remainder of the semester. We are just simply going to start adding content to it. So I'm going to start in my header, and I noticed a lot of people would push the tab button. You don't want to push the tab key on the keyboard. What you want to do is push 2 spaces. Now HTML is going to ignore white space when it actually comes to render the page, but it makes it easier to see things that are indented. But if you start using tabs, items will get indented way across the page and eventually start wrapping. And while I'm on that topic, one thing that you might want to turn on is up here in Notepad++, go to View and turn on Word Wrap, and what that'll do is it'll wrap the lines of text. Now one thing that it does, I have this thing called dummy text here, and if you notice I have line 1, line 2, line 3. When it word wraps, what it actually does is turns the whole line blue. So when I select within it, it actually will color the entire line. So even though Notepad++ is showing this as being multiple lines, it actually is just strictly one line of text because there's no carriage return at the end. Okay, so in my header, I'm going to make an H1 that says welcome. And then in my navigation, I'm typically going to use an unordered list for navigational items. So I'm going to make an unordered list. And my unordered list will contain line items. So I have link 1, link 2, link 3, and so forth. Okay, our div in the middle, this is where the body of our document is actually going to be. And then our footer is going to be things like our copyright information. Usually when I create copyright information, there is a specific layout for it. You type the word copyright first, and then we want the copyright symbol to show up. That's the C inside of a circle. And the way that you do that is it's an ampersand, copy, and then a semicolon. That will actually tell the web page to display the actual copyright information. And then what you do is whatever the year is. So if your web page has been around, say, since 2012, you might do something like this, 2012 to 2015. But in this case, we're just simply 2015. And then who is the copyright holder? Before I add any of the document text here, I'm going to save this, come over to my web browser and refresh, and you will see something that looks like this. Now these really aren't links yet. We'll make them links. And what you are going to do is you're going to start building a web page that is keeping track of all of the other pages in your site. So what we will do here is make each of these a link. Alright, so for right now, what I want to play with is a little bit of CSS. We are going to take some dummy text that is here. I've already saved it as a file called dummy text. And all I did was just simply created some text that says this is where your text is going to go. Alright, now what you'll notice is that Notepad++, when I pasted this in, did not keep my indent. So I'm just going to indent these so that way I can see that everything contained from here down to here is indented a little bit. It makes it a little bit easier to figure out where my body text is. Okay, so save it. Come over here and refresh. Remember, refresh is F5 and save is Control S. So this is what my text looks like. It's just a really basic page. Alright, so what I want to start playing with is making this text look a little bit different. Alright, so we're going to start playing with CSS. Now there are three ways that you can play with CSS. There are what's called an inline style, then you have an embedded style, and then you have an external style sheet. And then there's another one called imported, which we're not going to play with the imported. Imported was designed for a little while to be the way that you pull in an external style sheet, and what it actually does is causes problems because there's a difference between a linked style sheet, which is an external style sheet, and an import. And the difference is that an import will only allow you to import one at a time, whereas if you link to different style sheets, it can apply them all at the same time. So we are going to play with the links. But for right now, let's just start playing with styling some of these paragraphs. I want to start playing with this first paragraph. And what I want to do is I don't want this paragraph to look like the other paragraphs that are in here. So what I want to do is I want to start styling it. And we have different things we can do to play with it. Now we can only do this with individual tags. We can't do it with individual words yet. I will show you later in this lesson how to do that. But what I want to do is I want to modify the entire paragraph. And so let's say that I want to color it red. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a style by typing the word style. If I spell it right. Okay, so I'm going to type the word style equals, and then what do I want the style to be? Okay, so the style is going to be always going to be some sort of property and then a value for that property. Now these properties, there's a cheat sheet in the back of your book. It's on page 383 that you can go through and see all the different properties that are available. Now they don't provide every single one that's available, but they provide all the common ones. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to play with things like I want to change the color of this. Okay, so I'm going to change the color of this this paragraph to red. And notice what it is what's the property, then a colon, and then what is the value, and then a semicolon at the end. Now, officially, the very last one that you add, the very last property that you add for each of these styles, you don't have to put a semicolon, but please get in the habit of just adding the semicolon. That way you don't forget one. Alright, so what I'm going to do is save it. And if I come over here and refresh, you'll see now that entire paragraph is red. So this style right here will affect everything that is contained within this p tag. So this entire paragraph gets colored. Okay, other things I can play with are things like font family. And if you notice, because we're using an HTML document, Notepad++ actually understands the CSS elements that are here. So I'm going to type in font family, and I want to make this an Arial font family. Okay, so what we're doing is we're changing the font face, actually. So let's say I don't want Arial, I want something like Courier. Okay, I don't like Courier, I want it to be Times New Roman, which by the way is the default, so you don't really need to do that. Okay, so here's the thing. Let's say I do something like I want Calibri, which my computer has installed. However, if I go to a Mac, the Calibri font is not going to be installed, so they won't be able to use Calibri. What will happen is their browser will not render this as Calibri. What it will do instead is render it as its default font, which in this case is Times New Roman. On the Mac is also a Roman font. So if I really don't want this thing to be a serif font, I need to specify. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I want this thing to be Arial. And if they don't have Arial installed, then we can do something like Courier. And if they don't have that installed, then we could do Times New Roman. So what I've done is I put the first font that I want it to be, comma. If that one's not available, then use this one, comma. If that one's not available, then use this one. And I could put a list, so however many I want, I could put them all in here. But what it will do is, if it can't find any of these fonts, it tries the first one, then it tries the second, then it tries the third one. If it can't find it, then it just simply uses the default font. Okay, so now what I will see is this is now styled as Arial. Okay, so that only did the one paragraph. So if I want to do it with the other paragraph, so the next one, I'm going to have to do the same thing. So say style equals font family, Arial, Courier, Times New Roman, semicolon, and then close my quotes. Okay, so this is going to be kind of tedious if I have to do this for every single paragraph. So I'm going to show you in just a minute how to fix that. But I want to show you some other things we can do. I'm going to change not just simply the font family, but I also want to change the color. So after the last semicolon, I'm going to add a space and then type color, colon, and then what color do I want it to be? I want it to be green. Okay, now green is kind of generic because green on my computer may be a different color green from your computer. And from Windows to Mac to Linux to Unix to whatever other operating system, they're all going to render green differently. Okay, so I want better control of my colors. So this is where a color picker comes in. Okay, so there's a website called Color Picker. There are a bunch of other ones out there. You can use Adobe Photoshop. You can use the color picker in Microsoft Paint, any program that supports this. But what I'm looking for is the hexadecimal RGB value of each color. Alright, so I want to find a green that I like, and I want my font to be this color green. What I can do is I can select the hexadecimal code that is up here, and I can use that directly in my CSS statement. Okay, so what I'm going to do is come back over here, and instead of saying green, I'm going to put a pound sign and then the RGB hex code. Okay, so now if I save this, come over here and refresh. Now it doesn't look a whole lot different because I picked a green that's pretty close and I can't tell a whole lot of difference in it. But if I go back to my color picker, let's say I want to change this to blue now. And I like that blue. So now what I'm going to do is change the color to that. Refresh my page, and now it's that blue. Okay, so what I can do is I can select all of the colors. And the way that it works is the first two characters represent red, the next two represent green, and the next two represent blue. And those are my RGB values. Now, if the red and the green and the blue are all turned off, that's no red, no green, no blue, that's black. If I turn them all on, then it's white. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to play with, I want that text to be black, so I'm going to do 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Save it, go over here and refresh, now it's black. Okay, conversely, if I do F, 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 F. So all the reds turned on, all the greens turned on, all the blues turned on, and save it. It's going to be white, which means it's going to disappear. It's still here. So if I highlight it, I can still see it. But it's white. Okay, and then I can go in between there. So let's say do 999999. This would be a grayish color. And I can go in between. So now I have better control of the colors that I want. Okay, so there are a couple of shortcuts for this. So let's say I want to use something like EE3399. And let's see if this color will actually show up. Yes, it does. Okay, so now what I'm doing is this is what's called a web safe color. And a web safe color is just simply meaning that there are 255 variations of red, 255 variations of green, and 255 variations of blue. And that allows me to have all my 16 million colors. Actually, I'm sorry, it's 256 variations of each one, 0 through 255. But web safe colors, I actually have 16 red colors to play with, and 16 green colors to play with, and 16 blue colors to play with. And the web safe colors will render faster, and they are guaranteed to be the same on every computer. Now, what happened was back in the old days, back in like Netscape days with the GIF files, you only had the 16 colors to play with. So that was the reason for it. But if I'm going to do something like this where my red is simply EE and my green is 33 and my blue is 99, I can shortcut this a little bit and leave out the redundant values. So I end up with something like this. And when I refresh, I still get the exact same color. Please get in the habit, though, of using the fully qualified colors, because it makes it a lot easier for you to go back and figure out later, well, you know, I don't really like this. I want it to be a little bit lighter, so you would do something like this. And it changes just a tiny bit, but we can't really perceive that little bit of a difference, but there is a difference to it. But please get in the habit of using the full colors. Okay, so other things we can play with are, I want to change the font size here. What I can do is I can make it larger or smaller. So I'm going to do font size. And I have two ways I can play with the font size. I can actually control the font spacing, or not the spacing, but the actual height of it in terms of pixels. So I want to make my font 20 pixels tall. If I save this, now I'm making my font bigger. Okay, I want to make my font 60 pixels tall. Okay, so I'm forcing the font to be this exact size in terms of pixels. Now, forcing a font to be a specific size in pixels is usually not a good idea. What we want to do instead is make it some sort of multiplier of what's called an EM. So that's our emphatic size for it. So what I'm going to do is 1 EM is 100% of the original size. And so if I do something like 1.5 EM, it'll make it 1.5 times its regular size. And if I do 2, now it's twice as big as its normal size, and so forth. So when I'm making my font bigger and smaller, I typically want to do it in terms of EMs. That's like a percentage of the original size. And the reason for it is as people zoom in and zoom out on the page, I don't want to force my font to be a specific size, or when they zoom in and out, it remains that specific size no matter what. So it allows people that zoom in to have the font grow in terms of size with the rest of the page. Okay, so this is an inline style. And inline styles we don't really want to do too much unless we absolutely have to. The three different style types, you have external, which is a separate file. You have embedded, which is in the head of the page. And then we have inline, which is these. The three of those will get applied in that order. So an external style sheet gets applied first. And then the embedded style sheet gets applied. And then the inline style sheet gets applied. Which means, let's say I have an element that I've actually defined in all three of those types of style sheets. The one that the end user will actually see is going to be the inline style sheet. So the inline style sheet is going to be the one that overrides the other two. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm going to take out this the font family, because I don't want to have to specify this for every single paragraph that I have. Come over here and refresh. Everything is back to being Times New Roman now because that's my default font. Now I still have the color and I still have the font size, so this will be bigger. But what I want to do instead is I'm going to come up here into the head and I'm going to make a new section called Style. Okay, and within my style, what I want to do is start specifying what I want to be laid out a specific way. All right, so what do I want to manipulate? I want to manipulate my p tags. Okay, so my p tag, how do I want to manipulate it? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a set of curly brackets. And inside of the curly brackets, I'm going to put the properties that I want to manipulate. So in this case, I want to manipulate the font family for all of my p tags. How do I want to manipulate them? Well, I want to manipulate them so that they are all Arial or Courier, and then a semicolon. Okay, and I have another thing that I want to apply to it, which is we're going to do font weight this time, so we're going to make things bold. Okay, so font weight, and my options here are I can do normal, bold, bolder, or make it some sort of percentage. I'm going to do bold. And I can keep adding more things to this, but what's going to happen is it's going to make it look a little difficult to try to figure out what's what. So what I want to do is I want to put these each on a separate line. So each property is going to go on a separate line. And so what I'm going to do is this. And then my very last line is going to be like this. So what I will see each time is I'm going to manipulate the p tag, open the curly bracket, close it down here. Here are all of the properties that we are going to manipulate for it, one per line. Okay, so if I save this and apply it, now what I've done is, because I defined it up here as my embedded style sheet in the head, it will affect all of the p tags. So everywhere you see a p tag, now it is all font family, Arial, Courier, or font weight is bold. Okay, I don't want them to be bold anymore. I want them to be normal. Save it and refresh, and now they're no longer bold. So by doing this embedded, it's going to affect all of the p tags in the page. Now if you notice though, it did not affect my footer, and it did not affect my H1 or my line items. Okay, so I want to play with this second paragraph down here. And what I want to do is I want to make this second paragraph so that it is bold. I want just this paragraph to be bold. Okay, so I could do this with an inline style sheet. I could say style equals, and then font weight bold, semicolon. And what that'll do is it'll make it bold. Okay, but I don't want to do this. I want to do it a different way. Okay, so the way that I'm going to do it instead is I'm going to give this paragraph a name. And the way that I give it a name is by typing the word ID equals, and I'm going to call this second. It's my second paragraph. Okay, and what I want to do is I want to come up here into my style sheet, and I want to modify that second paragraph. Now, I gave it an ID, which is an identifier. And so now that I have this class identifier for it, what I need to do is tell it in the paragraph, in the style section that I want to manipulate it. So what I'm going to do is type a £sign and then second. And what that does is says, okay, anything that has the ID of second will get these settings. Okay, now when we do an ID, only one thing can actually have that ID. I can put the ID on multiple things, but what it'll do is in some of the browsers it'll actually throw a fit. It will not work right. So only one item gets an ID, or gets that same ID. So I'm going to say for the item that has the second ID, we're going to make the font weight bold. Okay, so now if I come over here and refresh, that paragraph still got the bold style. All right, I want to pick a color for the background of my page. So let's say I want the body background to be a gray color. So I'm going to say in my embedded style sheet, body, open, close my curly brackets, and don't forget to close the curly brackets. I get in the habit of doing them both right away just so I don't forget to do it. Okay, so my body is going to have a background color. And a lot of things can actually have background colors. And in this case, I'm going to make the background color pretty close to being black. So I'm going to actually specify the RGB values to £, and then we'll do something like 444444. So closer down to the black side. Okay, so now there is my background color. All right, so what I notice is that my text is a little bit more difficult to read. So what I can do is I can go to my P tag and I can say something like color, and the color is going to be white, which is all F's. Refresh, and now I can see my font. Okay, so just by simply modifying one space will affect these. Well, why didn't it affect this one here, the pink one? The reason for it is the embedded style sheet got applied first, so it converted this thing to white. Then when it comes down here, it looks at the color here and says this is the color, and then it applies that pink color to it. So it actually does get the embedded style sheet, but the one that we see is going to be the most granular one, which is the inline style sheet. All right, the last kind of style sheet is going to be the external style sheet, which is a separate file. So what I'm going to do is, here's my folder where my document is contained. I am going to create a new document. It's a new text document, by the way, and I'm going to call it style.css. It has to end in .css. It does not matter what the name of the file is. The extension has to be .css, though. Okay, so to actually use this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here into my document, and instead of having the style section here, what I want to do instead is I'm going to create a link. And my link will look something like this. Link, and its relationship to the document is that it is the style sheet. And we have to tell it what the hypertext reference is, just like we did with the A tag. So href equals, and it is in the same folder, so I can simply just state style.css. If it were in a separate folder, then I would have to actually specify the link to that other folder. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this style out of here. So I'm going to cut this. And instead, we are going to put it in the CSS document. Okay, now here's the difference. In our CSS document, we cannot have any HTML tags, so I have to get rid of these styles. And you will notice that when I cut and paste it from Notepad++, it did, it kept all my indents, so I want to get rid of those. Okay, so here's what I have now. I have my body background color is still going to be this. My P tags will still be this font family, weight, and color. And then that second paragraph, I still want it to be bold. And one of the things that's nice with Notepad++ is I can actually collapse these. So that way, if I have a really long document, it makes it really easy to see, okay, well, this stuff belongs to the body. This is all the settings for the paragraph tags and so forth. Now, if I open this up with Notepad or text edit on a Mac, or if I even open it up in where you view the source code in the web browser, I'm not going to see it like this. I'm going to see just as text. Okay, so what I'm going to do is save this. So I have my link for the style sheet, goes to this web page, and then now when I refresh it, it looks exactly the same, even though this stuff is not in this document. The reason for it is because it's in an external style sheet, and it calls the external style sheet. Now, I could do some other things. Let's say I come into here, and for this particular document, I want to make a new style here that, I really don't want the paragraphs on this particular page to be this white color. Then what I can do is I can do something like, well, for this particular page, my P tag is going to have a style like this, and the color is going to be a little lighter color. So maybe we do something like 999999. And now it lightens it. Okay, so what I just showed you is it applied the external style sheet. It made it white. Then it applies the embedded style sheet, which means it makes it this gray color. And then my first paragraph here has an inline style sheet, so that will get applied last, and therefore that's the one that you actually see for this particular paragraph. All right, the next thing I want to play with are going to be classes. Now, I showed you here with the ID, only one item can be called second. I should not ever see another ID in here called second. But what if I do want to apply the same style to two separate paragraph tags, and I want to make them the same? So let's say I have just two paragraph tags that I want to make red, which I want to make these two red. So what I'm going to do is, instead of using ID, instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to call it class. And my class, I'm going to call it something like red. Okay, and what I can do is I can use that same class down here. So what this does is it makes these two belong to a class of objects that are red. And what I'm going to do in my style sheet is I'm going to designate a class of objects by putting a period and then the name of the class. Okay, so this is anything that has the class identifier of red will get these tags. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say in here color, and I'm just going to make it red. I could do the RGB values, but just for the sake of this one, I'm going to make it easy and say red. Okay, so now when I save this and I come over here, now those two paragraphs are red. But okay, I called the class name red. Whatever the name of it is really doesn't matter. What I'm more concerned about is the tag itself. So if I wanted to make it green, now it makes both of those green. And our background color here, we want to change this, make it a little bit lighter. So you can see how with just simply the CSS elements here we can change things. Alright, so let's say I don't want to call this red, we're going to call this Bob. Like I said, the name doesn't matter. I call it Bob. If I come over here and change this to Bob, any paragraphs that have the class of Bob will still be green. They still get refreshed as green. Okay, so we want to play with some things like this paragraph here, the pink one, I want that one to have a border around it. Maybe it's something that we're trying to make emphatic. Well, we actually have a border property that we can play with. So I'm going to type border, and the border is going to be, how many pixels big is it? It's going to be 1 pixel. And then we have things like, do we want it to be a solid border? Do we want it to be dotted? And then what color do we want it to be? And so they're all going to be right here in the same tag. So border is going to be 1 pixel, solid, black. And if I save this, what you'll see is I actually just created a box around that whole P tag. Now, what this does for me is it allows me to see that a paragraph is what's called a block level element. And what that means is that it will take up all the space from the left side of the right to the right side of the page, and it creates a box. And no matter what, my paragraph is going to take up this area. Okay, but let's say I don't want to do the whole paragraph, I just want to do a couple of words. What I can do is, let's see, it is just here for purpose. So I want to take this section here where it says just here for the purpose, and I want to put a box around it. Well, a paragraph is a block level element, which means it's going to force a line break. A div is a block level element, which means it's going to force a line break. But I can use what's called a span. Okay, so I'm going to type in span, and I'm going to tell it that this little section here is an inline element that I want to manipulate. And what that means is by doing a span, it is not going to force a line break. Okay, so I'm going to give this thing a style. So span style equals border 1px. We could do things like dotted and then blue, just to play with different colors. And like I said, you can look at page 383, sorry, in the back of your book, and it shows you all of the values that are available here. Okay, so when I refresh this, you will see I now have a little light blue border over here. Now it's kind of light, so let's make it black just so you can see it. And it's dotted. Okay, well I can change the size of it. I want to make this 5 pixels big. There you go. So now I have an inline item that I made where I can actually manipulate it. And I could even do things like I could change the color of this. So the color of this I want to be white. I could do things like the background color. Maybe make the background color black, or let's say blue, and so forth. So I can play with inline items without causing a line break by using the span element. Now that you have your web page made with these colors in it, that's it. So we just simply would upload it. And by the way, this is a bad design, but this is what we would be doing to be able to manipulate the page and be able to add elements to it. So you're going to have an assignment listed for this week to create a web page, and just make sure you read through the directions to see what you're supposed to be creating, and then you're going to be modifying it each week from here out. So please go ahead and create the page, you upload it to your site, and let me know if you have any questions. Have a good week.